Hello and welcome to the garden. Today we are going to be talking about the dollar store stackable planter, year 2 edition. So last year I made a video when I first got this stackable planter about how I set it up and kind of what I filled it up with, but then I never really did like an update video dedicated to this planter again. So now that it is the next spring, I dug it out of the garage to get it put back together, and I wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit because I do have some kind of second year thoughts and things I'm going to do differently for this year versus how I did things last year. So the first thing I'm going to do differently is I'm actually going to pop off the bottoms of these. I did not do this last year. They do have drainage holes on the inside. I don't know if you can see in here, but there are actually drainage holes, but they drain into these little saucers on the bottom, and I am just taking like a flathead screwdriver and just kind of wedging it in here, and then you can kind of just pry them off. That's how I'm doing it. So I'm working on getting these all taken off, and now they have pretty nice big drainage holes in the bottom. So the next aspect that I'm going to be doing a little bit differently this year is actually how tall it's going to be. So last year I actually bought 12 of these levels, and I actually ended up losing 3 of them. So last fall, we're gonna go back to last fall, I actually had my tower tied to the cattle panel that it was sitting next to. And I cut that tie to pull the bean plants off of the cattle panel trellis, and then did not take the tower apart. And so it sat like that for like a month. I didn't think anything of it. And then one night we had a thunderstorm and it was super windy. And I got up the next morning and the tower planter had finally fallen over. Now, I expected this to happen, which is why I tied it to the panel, but when I untied it, it did eventually fall over. So I lost 3 levels from that. They cracked. So I had to get rid of 3 of the levels, so it's only gonna be 9 levels tall this year, which actually I think is gonna be fine. I don't think that it necessarily needed to be 12 levels high. So if you are in the market for these, or maybe you bought them earlier this spring, I don't know that you need to really stack them up as high as I did last year. I think 9 is gonna be totally fine. I am still gonna tie it to the panel like I did last year, but I'm not gonna do it at the top. I think I'm gonna do it like near the top, but not at the very top. The other thing that is changing this year is actually what I'm putting in it. So last year I had some flowers, some herbs, and some lettuce. And this year I am actually going to be focusing mostly on flowers. It's actually going to have all flowers in it. It won't have any sort of herbs or lettuce or anything like that. It's gonna be all flowers. So once I get the bottoms pulled off of all of these levels, I'm gonna fill it back up with some new potting mix. And this is just regular potting mix. This is not organic pro mix or anything like that. It's just the conventional Menards brand 2 cubic foot bags is what I bought of potting mix. So I am gonna pour out all the potting mix that is spent, and then I will refill it with the new potting mix for this year. I do have some levels here. A lot of the dirt that was in these fell out when it fell, but I do still have some that do still have dirt in them. And this is actually a chive plant, and this is starting to come back. So I'm actually gonna move this over to the other half of the yard to my new raised beds, and that will come back. This is a rosemary bush. I have never been able to get one of these to live through the winter. So this is probably just going to go in the compost, and I don't know what this was. But I'm just gonna dump this dirt out and get the bottoms popped off of all of these, and then we will work on rebuilding. Okay, so I have the bottoms taken off of all of these planter levels, and I grabbed my post out of the garage, and this post actually bent and so I had to do surgery on the top of it. But I think it's still long enough, so I'm just gonna put this back in the ground, kind of where it was last year. Maybe moved out a little bit, I don't know. And then all I'm gonna do is go get my potting mix out of the garage and start filling these up. I have quite the mess down here of bottoms from the planter bases, or the planter levels, but that's okay. I did get my chives moved over here, and those should come back, which is very exciting. So I'm gonna get these filled up, and I'm not gonna plant anything in them yet. It's still a little bit too early for me to plant stuff in here in terms of flowers, but in the next couple, 2-3 weeks, I should be able to come out and actually put some seeds in this to get started. So that's very exciting. So this is the potting mix I'm using. This is just the Master Garden brand potting mix. This is not organic, but I'm only doing flowers in here, so this is what I went with. These are from Menards. I think this bag was like $8.50 or something, so pretty good deal for 2 cubic feet. I have 3 of them in the garage. I'm not really sure how much it's gonna take to fill these up, but this is what we're using. All right, it is all filled up. That did not even take 1 2 cubic foot bag of potting soil, so that's pretty awesome. And the post was tall enough still, so also awesome. So this is all filled up and ready to go whenever the weather decides it's time. So that is ready to go. That was really easy. I am glad that I popped the little saucers off the bottom of each level. I think that that's really going to help with my drainage this year. I didn't necessarily have a problem with drainage last year, but I did have to water multiple times a day when it got hot. And so I'm hoping that having more drainage will keep the soil from getting hydrophobic, which happened last year. And so I'm hoping that I can avoid that this year. I am super excited to fill this up with flowers. I think it's gonna look super pretty. I'm gonna do some trailing things and a few different varieties of petunias, some nasturtiums, some marigolds, and whatever else. Whatever else I decide. So I am looking forward to it. I can't wait to have this stunning, beautiful, brightly colored tower right here in the middle of the garden for the bees and the hummingbirds and the pollinators. So if anyone has questions about this planter, about my thoughts from last year or anything like that, please let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions you had. I will say that these are good for things with shallow root systems. They don't do great with things that need more depth. So anything super shallow, it does totally fine. Lettuces, I grew arugula pretty late into the season in this last year, and it did great. But those things all have super shallow root systems, so these worked out. I'm hoping that the flower situation this year also works out. So that's gonna about do it for me out here in the garden. I'm so happy that it's sunshiny and not windy. We have had so much wind and rain in the last week, so that's why there was no video last week. But the spring weather has returned. Today is the first day of spring and I am so excited. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you in the next one.